And here he is, Lucas Meachem, my friend Lucas. The last time I saw you, Lucas, we were together in Dallas, ready to perform Don Carlo, and we were hit by COVID. What have you done since then? Where are you?
Well, first of all, it's so good to see you. I miss you. We were in the same room at the same time when the world fell in on our heads, when this COVID thing sort of landed on top of us. And so after Dallas, I was scheduled in Dallas, as you know. I was going to do Don Carlo and then Il Barbiere di Siviglia. So I was going straight into the barber. And so I stayed a little extra after that in Dallas, thinking it might happen, because we weren't sure at that time. And so I ended up leaving Dallas and coming back to my home in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I've been here ever since.
Wow. What have you been doing all this time? Have you been all of us crazy on Zoom? Have you taken opportunity to finally enjoy the sabbatical you have been looking for such a long time, for such a busy artist? Have you been learning role, doing laundry for your wife finally?
I've been doing every single one of those, along with being sort of really excited and really depressed. And it's just a roller coaster for everyone right now. So, I do a lot of Zoom stuff. I did a recital on my porch for my neighbors. I've got some other concerts in the area coming up there's a halfway house I'm actually going to be performing for young men who are just getting out of prison and are moving into the start of their lives, coming out of that sort of environment. And I'm basically trying to give back to my community in every way I can,
where are you going
while also feeding my.
Where are you going to do? Sorry to interrupt. The prison concert. Are you going to go in the prison itself?
No, it's a halfway house in downtown Minneapolis, where when young men come out of going to jail and prison, they give them a leg up to be able to make that gap between prison and the real world accessible for them. And so they give them a place to stay, they give them hot meals to eat, they sort of watch over them, and they're actually considered what do they call them, vulnerable adults. And I think that's a really beautiful way to put that. And I wanted to just sort of bring a little joy into their lives and just be able to spread my art out there. So it's a win-win for everyone, because I get to let my art and passion out, which it just feels like it builds up sometimes. I know it builds up in you, because I know known you for a long time, and it just builds up and you have to let it out.
Right. And just technically, I mean, aren't people worried about social distancing in the context of this concert? Have you negotiated a certain setup?
They've all been outdoors. Yeah, they've all been outdoors, and we're planning it all outdoors. We have a very nice electric piano. We're bringing, my wife Irina is going to be playing for me. So we'll just, plug it in and get going with it and see how it goes. Everyone will be with masks, and we're taking all the safety precautions. Yes.
Right. Well, that's extraordinary. I mean, yes, arts can change lives. I mean, I've seen this literally, and I've said often that art has changed my life, definitely. My first contact with music made me connect with something to me that was very important and liberated me from many of my anxieties, or my own personality could develop really through music. But I have seen, communities being changed by a new opera house, a new theater in there, and communities or people, individuals being touching their souls by a performance and really literally changing their lives. I think we're also part of the discussion that can happen in a city and contribute to some social evolution around the city, or create discussions and conversations that are going to be the start for real changes in life. What was your first contact with music?
Well, first of all, I want to jump on top of what you said, because you talked about, art changing lives. And right now, art is the thing that is helping everyone get through this. When we're at home and we either are unemployed or working, and then we come home from a busy day, we sit down and we watch TV. A TV show is put on by actors, by film crews. We listen to music by radio personalities. We read books by authors. And we even look online at software engineers who create their art through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and such. So I have to say that artists throughout this entire pandemic have been some of the most essential workers that we have, as far as keeping everyone's emotional and mental states positive and sort of moving forward. And to answer your actual question, my first row with classical music was three tenors tape that my mother gave to me, sort of just on a whim. And I used to sing along to the radio at full volume, full voice, to anything: Aerosmith, Journey, Whitney Houston, Queen. And it didn't matter what it was. I wanted to sing it. And all of a sudden I popped in that tape and tried to sing along to it. And it was terrible. It was the only thing I couldn't imitate. And I thought, I've got to figure out how these people do this. I've got to dig deeper into this. And so,
how old were you when that happened?
I was 16 or 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I was driving. I remember I had my license, and I'd drive around with Pavarotti cranking on the radio, thinking I am so cultured in Carthage, North Carolina.
So what's the next step from just screaming your head off trying to be Pavarotti in a car to, actually learning singing and realizing you have a voice?
Well, I grew up in North Carolina in an area that in the South, we call it the sticks, because there's so much forest around that there's not many people. My closest neighbor was about 3/4 of a mile down the road. And so there weren't many opportunities for me in rural North Carolina. And so I also came from a family that we had what we needed, but we definitely didn't have a lot. So I went to the school that I could afford, which was the school that I could get into, and that was Appalachian State University. And for me, it ended up being a perfect fit, because the voice teacher I had at the time was someone that kept me within the lines of good singing. So I would experiment and express myself through all of the lines, and as soon as I could cross it, he'd drag me back. But he gave me that freedom to express myself in my own personal way without going too far. And so, yeah, I went to a small college in North Carolina, and then I went to the Eastman School of Music, and then I went to the Yale School of Music, and then I ended up going to the Young Artist Program at the San Francisco Opera. So it was a gradual progression over about 10 years that I sort of stepped from a better college to college, and then a wonderful young program.
Okay, so you went to the San Francisco Young Artist Program. Did you already know at that point that this was a career you wanted to embrace? And was that realization that you could make money with this, that you could make this your job for your life, starting in San Francisco, before San Francisco? Was that part also gradual?
I think for every artist that attempts to do art as a career, the financial side of things somehow we don't think about it. We don't think about it, and we just sort of trip, stumble, and suffer our way through into the next phase of being an artist. And that's exactly what I did. I thought to myself, let me see how far I can take this. Right. Because if I can take it as far as I would like to, then I have no clue where this train will end, where this trip of mine will end. And so it really was just that I just held the coattails of the journey and rode them through what has become a career. So right. Yeah, money, I never really even considered that I would be, making a real living doing this. I remember the first gig I ever got, and I got paid the AGMA minimum for a soloist. I thought I was the richest guy in the world, and that's not so much money.
Right. So what you say is totally true. Almost all the young artists or young students who embrace this career, they have no idea how it works. They have no idea what their chances are to have a career. And I am a little conflicted about this, because I think schools are not necessarily, really telling them the truth. On the other hand, they could not handle the truth. And being ignorant of how difficult it is maybe the only way you can do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's a very difficult balance, where I think, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say this, where I feel schools are sometimes borderline dishonest is that they have these students who take student loans hoping they will remake those student loans by being a singer or something like that. And very few of them actually achieve this, even in the highest schools. And so there is a real problem with this, and probably the crisis now is going to somehow reinforce this. Beside this little part you got, then how did it work to finally go on stage, sing Barbieri di Sevilla on the biggest stage on Earth, being a regular guest in Metropolitan Opera, Covent Garden, and all of this? How did that happen?
Well, it was slow, man. It was a marathon. I tell everyone that this career is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sprint, you're gonna pull a hamstring. You're gonna get tired, you know. So you have to just take every step for what it is. Like with the colleges I went to programs. Every summer I went to a slightly better program. Every house I sang at was slightly better, you know. And so you have to sort of build it up over time. And that's what's difficult for some of these young singers. You talk about, you know, in school, they don't have a clue that when they get out of school, there's no guarantee that they're going to make money doing what their degree is in, you know. Whereas for instance, I was in school for 8 years. I have 0 degrees, 3 different universities, no degrees. But another person could go to school for 8 years and get a law degree. They're going to have a job after that. With me, there's no guarantee for artists. So I've looked at it from that standpoint throughout my entire career of there's no guarantee, which makes me a little bit nervous about my next paycheck sometimes. Now that I have contracts for the next few years, it's better. But it also makes me humble, and it makes me appreciate what I have in the moment.
Right.
You know, because I love every gig I go to. I get on the plane, I feel so thankful, and I have such gratitude for what I'm about to experience with these new artists that I'm going to meet, and my old friends that I'm going to see again. So yeah, I've got a lot of gratitude for what I've got.
Right. I think what you say about the career never being settled is true, even at our level. You know, you never know. And there is something sometimes scary in knowing you are booked for several years. There are other periods where you are less booked, and also you see some white space in your future calendar, and maybe that gives you a certain kick to maybe move around and try to understand why it's going on and why it's happening or why it's not happening. But it's never ever secure. And what we have seen is people who have, few people know this, but I have seen a lot of singers who had not a very natural voice, little talent, but such a resolve, such an energy, such a focus in trying to get to the next step, to the next gig, perfecting their art, working on the qualities they had and expanding them, working on their problems, and really see how can I move this, leverage this, change the sign of this, the polarity of this, and make this a plus, and have really very strong careers. We also have seen beautiful voices have no career at all. And so that's something that is actually quite scary if when you start realizing this in a career. No career is secure. And I don't want to embarrass anybody, but there are people we knew 5 years ago who were just booked, and they did the wrong production here. They said the wrong thing there, and they said it again there, and they are done. Or it's going to be very difficult to swim back. And they were very high, and then you go lower, and as you were not so nice in those houses lower, they don't want you anymore. So, you know, that's a very good advice I got from a colleague. You know, you're going to climb this career. Make sure you are nice to everybody when you climb up, because these are the same people you're going to meet when you climb down. And inevitably, at one point, you will climb down.
There's a wonderful joke that represents this perfectly. And they say the 4 stages of the opera career, what are they? And they say the first one is, who is Emmanuel Villon?
Yeah.
The second one is, get me Emmanuel Villon. The third one is, we have Emmanuel Villon. And then the fourth one is, who is Emmanuel Villon?
Yeah, with the next one is with the new Emmanuel Villon.
It was the new, exactly. There you go. Exactly.
That happened here. met about more than you and I, more than 10 years ago. I don't remember how long ago. It was a tour that we did of Jolanta of Tchaikovsky with a great cast, including Anna Netrebko. And we even recorded this Jolanta for Dutch gramophone. And you were part of the recording, and you were actually singing one of the two baritone parts, but you were not singing in the recording the highest baritone part. You are world famous for being a high baritone, but you were singing, let's say, a part that is usually given to a darker voice, fair enough, or even a bass baritone. Where do you characterize yourself as a voice? You are a high baritone. You are what kind of baritone are you?
Well, thank you for that lead-in. That was wonderful and very validating. So I appreciate that. I would classify myself these days as with one foot in the lyric baritone pool and another foot in the Verdi baritone pool. Where I'm sort of transitioning between the two fachs, and it's a wonderful transition. And well, the person who has given me this opportunity to really transition and say I'm here in the Verdi baritone world is you and the Dallas Opera. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for giving me that opportunity.
And it was, we talked about this with David Lomelli, our director of casting, was such a visionary when it comes to voice too. And I remember we had discussions about this, and we just say, well, actually, Lucas is the right. Let's see how Lucas feels about going, deeper in these parts. What are the
it takes time. It takes time, and so, I'm ready. I'm there.
From as you know, conductors think they know voices. They don't really know. But so I'm going to expose myself. I would say you have a voice that's naturally extremely resonant in the top register, very strong in the top register, very solid, that goes up naturally, E, F, F sharp, G sharp, you actually go much higher than this, and it goes bigger and bigger. But the payoff of this is that when you are lower, you don't necessarily have the same volume. And I suppose if you try to darken the voice, you might lose some of this top. How do you negotiate all of this? Can you still sing Valentin, Barbiere, and move into a more traditional Verdi baritone role?
Well, that's the biggest challenge for me. And you hit the nail on the head with what you said is when I sing Verdi, I have the great Verdi baritones of the past in my ear. And that is the biggest issue for me, is that I have to trust myself and trust not only my voice, but you and David Lomelli and Ian at Dallas Opera, that if you wanted to hear somebody else sing it, you would have hired someone else to sing it. But you want to hear my voice interpret this role. And that gives me a lot of faith that you have faith in me. I have faith in myself, and I also have faith in Verdi, because when Verdi wrote this music, the orchestration was smaller and the voices were quite more forward. So I think with the 50s, 60s, and 70s of making recordings with microphones right there, people could just cover everything and sound like these gods, because the microphones were so close, and also the houses were smaller. But now, I mean, we kind of get into a vocal technique thing, to cover or not to cover too much, And so with the invention of these larger opera houses, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 seats, you have to sing with what we call squillo on the voice, which is really sort of a forward space for those of you that might be watching this just for fun. And so I feel like I am kind of the king of that sort of singing. Well, maybe not the king, but I'm definitely a subscriber to the ideology.
You are the mega prince, and you are the king for me. And so the squillo, for the people who are not familiar with voice technique, actually even singers might have a different definition of the squillo, but this is really what's giving the high harmonics in the voice. It has to do with the resonance of the skull, literally here, and the squillo would be opposed to the petto, which comes more from the chest here. And probably the holy grail of voices is to connect the two and still being able.
Of course, there is absolutely a connection between the two, and the resonators, the resonating spaces of the mouth, the pharyngeal cavity, and the sinus cavity, of all those things together. It's like a pot of chili. You got to have the right ingredients. You got to put them all together in the right way, and then maybe stick it in the refrigerator for 5 days. Then it'll be perfect.
So you know, among singer types, there is the stereotype of the baritone being the one with overthinking technique. You know, it's always the one thinking about it. Whereas the
wait, really? That's baritones, not tenors?
Yeah. It's the tenors don't sing technique. They are just worried they don't have the high notes that day. But I think you are one of these singers who always arrive immensely prepared, who knows what he's doing technically, and who is extremely demanding of himself. And I saw that from the very first time we worked together. And you know your languages, and for instance, Yolanta, you were singing in Russian with an entirely Russian cast. And if I remember correctly, they wanted to start talking to you in Russian because your Russian was so good that they assumed you were fluent in Russian. Two things. The first thing I want to go a little there, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Talking of vocal technique in general and how you voice, you know, maybe now you are exploring something that is a little darker, a little maybe even larger. Let's say the Verdi baritone. You have an exceptional top, and I'm sure some people, you know, it's very current and ordinary for conductors to see a baritone who has a good top and to say, oh, you are a tenor, you should be a tenor, especially when you have that clarity in the high notes. And I have heard, you know, your high B flat, your high B natural, and I might have heard sometimes even a high C. So I'm sure you have been asked this before. Aren't you hidden tenor? Are you do a tenor in the closet?
Well, there's a lot of history behind this question, you know, and it's I don't want to, you know, beat my baritonal chest too hard against this, but when we talk about this, you're basically talking about sort of a Zwischenfach, which means two options for a vocal category.
Right.
And right now I'm a high lyric baritone, and a Helden tenor is a little above that. Like even a Verdi baritone, a Helden tenor is a little higher than that, sort of where the tessitura of the voice sits. So I would say this, that if I was a mezzo that wanted to sing low soprano music, I'd have no problem doing that. If I was a soprano that wanted to sing higher mezzo music, I'd have no problem. A bass that wanted to sing baritonal rep, no problem. A tenor, look at Placido Domingo, who wants to sing baritone rep, no problem. But there is a huge faux pas to a baritone stepping in and singing tenor rep that is undeserved, unfair, and underrepresentational of some voices as individuals rather than an entire category of voice. Having said that, I could absolutely sing Siegmund very well. But I would be, if I were to become a Helden tenor, I'd have probably 3 roles I could sing, and then 6 months out of the year, I'd probably sit at home, you know, resting my voice so I could be able to do it again the next time. So if someone came to me and said, yes, you can Zwischenfach between baritone and Helden tenor repertoire, I'd probably take concerts and sing the first act of Walküre every once in a while. Absolutely, I don't see why not. Does that make me a tenor? Probably not, but I can't say yes or no, except to tell you right now, I feel wonderful as a baritone. If in 2-3 years, my B flat turns into a B natural, a C, who knows? Or if my B flat turns into an A and a G sharp, then there's your answer, you know? So nobody knows what the future holds. I'm open to it. I'm not against it, but right now I'm definitely a baritone.
Right, okay, that's a very clear answer, but I think you brought light to something that I never thought about. There is a taboo in all of a sudden occupying wrongly the tenor fach and that category, and I think it's a pity in many ways. And And I think you're very, very lucky that, you know, you have all these options in your voice, and you probably
Thank you.
you know, that is a blessing as long as you can negotiate that smartly, and I know you will. And the fact you have, you know, such a margin in the top, and you have also a margin in the bottom of the voice, that's great. I can. What do you feel? Can you? Because this is something people don't know much about. What would you define a baritone Martin? I mean, you're familiar with the expression of a baritone Martin, so
Yeah.
French baritone Martin. And do you fit in that category too, or not?
I'd say that's probably, yeah. If yeah, I normally think of a lyric baritone or a French lyric baritone being very similar to each other. And I have to say, for French baritone rep, that's probably what I sing best in this world. At least 4 years ago, I was probably best at that repertoire. As I'm stepping into the bel canto rep, I'm finding that the voice changes. That's the thing, you know. It's like throwing darts at a dartboard, you know. So as time progresses, my voice is changing, and sometimes I feel like I'm playing catch up with my voice. So right when I figured something out, all of a sudden there's something else I can discover. But that's wonderful for me as a student of singing, to be able to continue my journey as a singer, you know, because I always say that if you feel like you've sang the best performance of your life the night before, then you only have one direction to go, and that's down. So I've never sung a perfect performance. I will never sing a perfect performance. I look forward to the challenge of chasing perfection, knowing that I will never achieve it. And it's the same thing with my vocal fach and my vocal type. I will continue to sing music that feels good to me and that fits into my voice well, and that people enjoy hearing me sing, as long as it feels good for me.
Right. And that's very wise. And I would ask you two questions from this. The first one is, where does language play a role in this? How does that define a certain vocal position for you? And also, I have seen singers, and some of your colleagues I was talking to talk directly to this about this, being able to make conscious choices on where they wanted their voice to sit, and a little higher or lower and so on. So how do you manage this question of languages and how it's going to set your voice in a certain place? And then all of a sudden, are you yourself deciding, okay, for that role in that language, I'm going to try to move my old vocal position or whatever a little higher or lower?
You are opening Pandora's box right now.
Let's open it.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, we can get into it. I'd start maybe, like you said, from the language perspective, that if I sing Italian, my vowel, I mean, because when we talk about making sound with our vocal cords, our vocal folds, all the sounds we make are voiced consonants and vowels. So mostly vowels. The unvoiced consonants are all those things. So those don't carry. So what we're really talking about is vowels. In Italian, you've mostly, I mean, except for some darkened or darker light vowels, we've got 5 vowels, you know, so the vowel spectrum is very small. You get into German and French and the vowel spectrum gets a little bigger. So I'd start with Italian. Seems to be sort of the easiest language because you can sing sort of in one shape for most of the night. Yeah. As soon as you get into French, some of the worst diction I've heard in French are native French speakers. And I think it's because they cover too much, they nasalize too much, and then all of a sudden their resonance goes up. So the goal of any singer is to sing a beautiful line that is consistent all the way through. When you cover too much or you change the vowel, it dips down, sort of like a bar in a sound bar or in a sound wave. The sound just dips, so the audience hears wah, 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 like that. So yeah, so it's all about keeping consistent sound as best you can while singing a semblance of the language that the audience can understand, even if someone sitting next to you would say, that's not a true French schwa, you know? So then we start to talk about the idea of what you said is like, what pitch do I change on? You know, do I change for certain repertoire as well? And I'd say, yes, you can absolutely do that as well. If I'm going to sing Mozart, I'm probably not going to cover all of my E naturals on the A vowel, but if I'm singing Verdi, I'm definitely covering all my E naturals on an ah vowel. But then that can also change based situationally in the opera and based on the vowel that I'm singing. Because if I'm singing an oo vowel, I'm going to cover on an E flat. So I mean, that's why I said it's Pandora's box, you know, and
I
it's
love
a
it.
very involved question.
Such a baritone. I love it. So when you perform any, I mean, Don Carlo or Valentin or Barbiere, you have time to think about this every time you're on stage and do the staging and think of the guy who is down the pit who doesn't understand what you're doing, and your mom is in the audience and you're making sure she can hear you. What's your process on stage once you are totally in the fire?
Okay, well, it's a great question, but it doesn't represent what I do on stage, because what represents me on stage is the months of effort and practice and time I put into it before I arrive for the rehearsal process even.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why people ask me, do you ever get nervous? I say, no, I'm never nervous. First of all, I'm not a nervous type of person. Second of all, I prepare so much that I don't have to be nervous because I know nothing will go wrong because I'm so prepared. So being prepared gives me the confidence to go be great.
So let me just say something for the people listening. I would say Luca is the top 5% of level of preparation of any other colleagues at his level. And at that level, actually at a very high international singer level, you have a big spectrum, because we have some of our colleagues, because they are so famous, they arrive on unprepared. We have other colleagues who are even more famous, who are more prepared, because that's the way they work. And sometimes I must say the unprepared one can still deliver an interesting performance. The best performances are absolutely, with no contest, the one that are from the one who are the most prepared. And among the most prepared, you are extremely, extremely prepared. So I just want to say this. Please go on.
Thank you. Well, okay. Thank you so much for saying that. And I mean, I know that because I would be mortified to show up on the first day of rehearsal with you and sing a wrong note where you say, no, Lucas, I'm sorry, it's actually an E flat, not a D. I would have nightmares. I have nightmares about that exact situation. So to your original question about how do I get out on stage and do what I do, and with this idea of everything we've spoken about before of am I going to cover here, I prepare so much that I can go out on stage and forget everything I prepared for and be in the moment. The preparation is all about not messing up in the moment so that I can go out there and let it free. I don't think about my mom.
Right.
I don't think about the lights.
Right. But that moment is both a vocal moment, it's a musical moment, which is not necessarily the same thing as a vocal moment. It's a dramatic moment too.
Absolutely. I'm acting first and foremost.
You're okay.
Yeah, I'm acting. I'm an acting singer, not a singing actor. You know, and so that's how I like to think of it. You know, is that I am so in the music. I mean, I can't stand on my head and do some of these things because I guess I am singing, but again, and as I'm going through a role, I've hit record on my mental recorder. And I save the mistakes I make, because like I said, I've never given a perfect performance, nor will I. All the mistakes I make, or all the little flubs, or all the things I even think I can do better, I go straight back to my dressing room. I open my score and I make a little mark, say, work on that before the next show. Mm-hmm. So that the next show will hopefully be even better than the one before. So I'm always striving for perfection, even though, like I said, I'll never achieve it. So, and I appreciate you saying what you said about my preparation, because I do work very hard for that.
It's real. The actor-singer part interests me very much. You came to this profession because you love singing.
Yeah.
Did you have to get in you a love for theater, or the love for singing was already connected to something dramatic in you? How did you develop your dramatic craft? And because you are very, I would say, your acting also is always coming from a place of preparation. You have an idea of the role, you have an idea of the history of the role, you understand the plot in general, and so on. So what is your training as an actor? I think this is very different from one singer to another singer.
Well, I think the acting with great composers starts with their composition. If you take The Marriage of Figaro, every emotion is in the orchestration.
Hmm.
Every emotion the character is about to experience happens a split second before he says, "I'm mad," or
Hmm.
"I'm happy." And so it leads, one leads into another. And with the best of operas, it's a give and take between the words, the singing, and the orchestration of the music, you know? And so that's what I love so much about, that's actually my favorite opera, if I'm being
Hmm.
honest. And it's because of that exactly. So to begin as a singer, I can love the emotion that the music evokes. And then I put the words to it and realize the emotions I felt correspond to those words. So in a way, acting came very naturally to me because I looked at it as just an extension of the music. And I did take acting classes, though. I worked very hard on my acting skills. And acting for opera is much different than acting for film, and
Right.
so you do have to learn these things. And in the same way, I know exactly when I'm going to cover my E natural on an A vowel. I know exactly how I'm going to face when I'm singing when I'm singing a high note. I'm probably going to be downstage and towards the center. If I'm singing something else, it's okay if I'm a little off, you know. But and that's what we learned during the rehearsal process is how to position ourselves best. And it's just, I don't know. But it all started back with that three tenors tape, you know, that my mom gave me. Every time I get on stage, Emmanuel, I get those same bubbly butterfly feelings that I felt the first time I listened to that tape. As soon as you hit the downbeat of ba-dum-bum-bum, or, you know, whatever it is, it can be anything. And my heart just starts to patter. I'm just so into what I do. And that's why I prepare. That's why I care so much. And it's all about the passion for the music.
Yeah, and you do have that passion for the music. When you prepare a role, what's your process to prepare a role? I mean, do you listen to various tapes? Do you read the score first? Do you have? I suppose you prepare roles with your wife. Do you work before you work with her? Is it in various stages? How does that function?
Well, it probably won't surprise you that I'm very meticulous with how I prepare my score and my roles. And for me, it starts, I like to actually highlight my part so it just jumps out to me visually. And while I'm doing this, I'll listen to one recording as I'm highlighting and just go along and listen to just my parts, because some of the opera I like for it to be a mystery to me, because the plot is moving on and my characters shouldn't know what's going on. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know what's going on in The Marriage of Figaro, and other operas, but
No,
sometimes
should
it's
happen.
nicer in the, yeah, it's nicer in the beginning sort of to not know, so that I can continue to be surprised by things when it happens to me on stage. So I start by highlighting, listening to the music. And a lot of people say don't listen to the music. And if you're a young singer out there listening, I'd say it might be difficult to listen to the music for you, because you'll have a tendency to imitate rather than sing with your true voice. I'm at a stage now where I can listen to the music and still give my own spin. Then I go back and translate it. I think this is where all of my acting comes from, is directly from the translation of the words. And so I go back to translate and I listen to a different recording. And so I'll tell you the reason I listen to different recordings is because I like the original ideas I have for acting and for vocal moments. Some of the best baritones that have sung those roles and recorded those roles already had that idea themselves. So I want to either steal from them or create a new moment that is my interpretation of that role, so that I'm not only stealing or not only copying, but I'm also creating something different. And that's where my creative juices sort of get to be poured onto the score. And that's where my artistic sort of expression comes from.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. I mean, I have somehow the same technique as you, including
Yeah.
listening to the people. It helps me
Yeah.
validate ideas I had, or just say, well, actually,
Yes,
not
that's
work.
exactly right. The validation. You're like, oh, that was a good idea. Listen,
Yeah,
Thomas Hampton did that. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But being so prepared, having an idea of how the drama and the music connect and so on, that can put you sometimes maybe in a tricky situation when you have a director that is either less prepared about the role or who has a vision of the role and the piece in general that is in conflict with your level of preparation. So, I worked a lot in Europe. I think you work quite a lot in Europe too. So
I have.
how do you deal with those situations where, a stage director, and even a very good stage director, is asking something that seems in direct contradiction with the way you have understood a situation or even a character?
Well, it really depends on the decade in my life in which I was dealing with this director.
Ah,
In my 20s, I was very, oh, yes, I'd love to do that, whatever you need. In my 30s, I was combative,
uh-huh.
and I would say, well, the words, look, the words right here, these are the words, you're not doing the words. And in my 40s, I've come to realize that, and hopefully in my 50s and 60s, I'll realize something different that is even better than what I'm about to say. But for now, I'm at the point where I understand that this art form is, to be considered a modern art form, we have to try out modern art ideas in our art form. And this is the Régie Théâtre that we've both experienced in well, Europe and sometimes in the United States as well. Régie Théâtre is basically a new take on an old show. And it's doing La Bohème on the Moon, like the production I'm supposed to be doing right now in Paris at the Opéra National de Paris. And, so when directors direct, and a director's goal is never to have people leave having an emotional experience. The worst thing that you can do, that can happen to a director, is for someone to do this. Should we go get the car? You want to pull it around? That's the worst thing in a director's world. They want you to love it, or they want you to hate it, because at least you showed an emotional response to their art. And again, and going back to the Régie Théâtre thing, without trying new things, we can't have the art that is the art of the future. We can't have the stagecraft that is the stagecraft of the future. Without Bach, we can't have Mozart. Without Mozart, we can't have Rossini, we can't have Donizetti, we can't have Verdi, we can't have Puccini, we can't, the list goes on. Strauss, Wagner, Schoenberg, it goes on and on. So without somebody first experiencing and having someone say that was crap, we can never have new art. So I appreciate directors for pushing the envelope forward, even though sometimes I disagree with what they've told me to do. If they say, go hump that dead horse, I'm saying, well, okay, how does Don Giovanni rationalize that? So I try to be understanding and come from it from a deeper artistic position, rather than just cut them off right away like I might have done in my 30s, or just accept it for what it is because I'm too scared to speak up in my 20s. So that's where I am at right now with it.
Right. Well, but that I think that's terrific. And usually, if what you call Régie Théâtre, as I've said to many of your colleagues, and as you know, is called generally Eurotrash in the US. Where
I guess Régie Théâtre is the nice way to put it.
Right. Well, but I personally, as you know, I love theater, and I very often I like things taken from a different angle. But of course, then you need to understand the resistance of the piece to that, and that resistance and that kind of work through is what makes a performance interesting from my point of view. But that's depends how much time you have to rehearse, and it depends on the maturity of the performers, and it depends also on the kind of audience you have.
Well, I understand from an audience perspective, it's hard to watch something you don't like it's to suffer for art. But that's what artists are doing all the time, 9 times out of 10, it might be what you said is Euro trash. But then 1 time out of 10, it's going to change your perspective entirely, possibly not just on the piece, but on your entire life.
Right.
And that's the goal. That's the goal of our art right there.
Just to be clear, a lot of things that people have called Eurotrash, I've called genius theater. So, for me, we were talking to Paul Curran the other day, and he was bringing a very interesting point, which is that a lot of these libretti, if you take them literally, you don't really understand. You have to understand they were a reaction to censorship. So you have to understand what was not said. And that tension between what the libretto is literally saying and what he's trying to express through a code, but resisting, and it's not totally there, but it's behind, that's the kind of situations that can be much better understood if you transpose the action. So having the action,
Paul's brilliant. I've not thought about that, but yeah,
yeah,
Paul's brilliant.
that's a very, very, very. I'm actually going from now on to make that point mine and not Paul. Paul, sorry, I won't quote him on this.
That's a great point, Emmanuel, and so
yeah.
unique in your own.
Thank you, thank you. When you work, there are also stylistic differences. You know, if you do Valentin, if you do Don Carlo, or if you venture into a Wolfram in Tannhauser, for instance, you have a different stylistic approach to things. How do you work this? Do you like, I mean, first of all, let's say you have you have done the Italian repertoire a lot, you've done some of the French repertoire, you've done contemporary English repertoire. Have you approached the German repertoire, and is it different? If so, you have done it in songs, I suppose. You have done Dichter Liebe, or in the baritone versions, right?
Yeah, I've done several German operas multiple times. I've done Piro's, the Die Todesstadt, you know, Korngold. I've done Tannhäuser a few times around the world. So, you know, German opera is not foreign to me, and I've sung more German lieder than any other art song. So,
Right.
yeah, I love singing in German. It's also the first language that I learned. So, excuse me, outside of English, and as an adult.
All right.
So, I guess I want to make sure that the differences we're talking about are so idiosyncratic
Right.
that it's hard to speak about. So if you're a young singer and you're listening to this, the most important thing about your singing is that you only sound like yourself. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people will, again, the problem with listening to recordings is that you'll tend to imitate. Mm-hmm. And so I tell every young singer this, that we all have our own, it's like our fingerprint. We all have our own unique thumbprint that is only our own. It's the same with our voice. When we listen to ourselves back on a voice machine or something, or voice messaging, not that anyone knows what an answering machine is anyway, all these days now, but we all have our own unique voice. And you do yourself a disservice by trying to sound like me, or Robert Merrill, or Dmitry Vostovsky, or Bryn Terfel. You are your own self, and you should always try and sound like yourself. So within that context, the differences between these styles for me vocally are slight. And again, and they're also very involved. Like we spoke about before, it's normally, where am I going to cover this note? Mm-hmm. How far down? And what is the orchestration at this point for me to continue to sort of back off of this phrase with the decrescendo or not? So, yeah, I mean, it's a real can of worms we open.
But I think it's fascinating. And even the people who are not from our industry, I think it's important that they understand there are all those layers and these complexities. And you're right, it always boils down to this first igniting fire you had in you as a teenager, hearing something that you say, oh my God, this is really cool. How do I get to this? And at the same time, there is this level of, although it's very complex, it needs to be myself. I need to go to exactly the way I would sound. I need to forget all of this, and I just need to be totally honest and authentic in this. We are scheduled to do together, talking of being very direct with the language, we are going to do together at the Dallas Opera the world premiere of a commission from the Dallas Opera of The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which is the story of a man who got a stroke, and he was like kind of stuck in his own body without being able to move, but the brain was totally there, and he dictated a full book just blinking in the eyes and giving each letter of the alphabet like this. Joby Talbot is the composer, libretto of Gene Shear, who was the librettist for a lot of things for the Dallas Opera, including the now, piece that
Everest.
Is Everest, but Moby Dick too.
Moby Dick, yes. With Jake Hagee.
So this is singing in English and being in that kind of more contemporary setting. Is it something you have done a lot? And what's your approach to this?
I have sung a good bit of contemporary opera, but I've also sung a lot of operetta and Gilbert and Sullivan in my beginning days in English. So that's how I got my feet wet first in the opera world. My first professional gig was at the Ohio Light Opera, singing 8 operettas a summer, and having to learn all the dialogue, all the music. And so I feel like it's kind of, I mean, it's obviously not a comedy like Gilbert and Sullivan would be, but I really earned my wings, if you will, singing English operetta in English. And so it'll be really wonderful to go back to that after so long singing in other languages, to go back to my mother tongue and to sing in English. And but I'm mostly excited about it because of 3 things: Joby Talbot, Gene Shear, and the Dallas Opera. I know the Dallas Opera is going to give it its all. I know it's going to be an amazing production. Joby Talbot's an amazing composer. We've been speaking on the phone, actually. We're scheduled to meet up in Paris this fall when I'm there singing at the Opéra National de Paris. Escamillo and Carmen, we're going to meet there and work on the score together. I'm going to visit the man who you were talking about who wrote The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. His name is Jean-Dominique Bobby. That's the character I'll be playing. And after his stroke, he suffered this thing called locked-in syndrome, which is not paraplegia or quadriplegia, which is an injury to the spinal cord, but it actually comes from a stroke, like you said, where you can't move any part of your body, and the only part of his body he can move is his eye. Ended up writing this amazing book that became a film, and now for the world premiere, we'll be premiering it at the Dallas Opera this spring. And anyway, I couldn't tell you, I'm so excited about this journey. I'm going to visit the hospital where he stayed while I'm in Paris, and I've got huge plans. And the third thing is Gene Shear has written the most incredible libretto I've read in probably 5 years. It's incredible. I was in Chicago singing Don Giovanni there, and I met up with Gene Shear and I met up with Joby Talbot. They were doing Everest at Chicago Opera Theater while I was at the Lyric Opera doing Don Giovanni. And we had a big lunch and we talked about it. I read through the libretto and I had tears in my eyes at the end of Act 1. I mean, it was just, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And if you miss it, you're going to miss an important historical event.
Right. Well, I love your passion, and I am looking forward to this. You know, it was a very important project for us to save, between quotes, when we decide to move some of the events of the season that were scheduled in the fall to the spring, like now most of the US companies. And so that means you needed to take off some of the events of the spring, but the thing we all wanted to absolutely keep was the Diving Bell and the Butterfly, to show the relevance of contemporary opera. It's an important project, and it's probably going to help us connect to different people, and to show that we are striving, alive, and strong. I think we're getting toward the end of our conversation, Lucas. Just 2 very quick questions. How do you think this pandemic is going to affect you and our industry in general? And what is how much are you teaching yourself? Are you teaching online? Because you conceptualize things so strongly, I think you would be an amazing teacher. Do you have any interest in teaching at all?
Well, thank you for saying that. Right now, I'm basically looking at the world and thinking, how can I help? Mm-hmm. How can I give back? So teaching for me is something I always do, mostly for free. I give it away. I have a live session I do every week on my Instagram where I answer every question that comes my way about opera to the best of my ability. And then I have a blog I write. I put out the baritone blog. So I'm always trying to put out information about the opera world to sort of decrease the stigma about opera and open the doors and say, look, it's this beautiful modern art form that can exist, which is what you're trying to do with Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And it's like, look, this is why we're here. We're artists. We're here to do this. So right now, teaching and taking people's money in this time is very difficult for me to do. And look, if you want to teach, of course, everybody's got to earn a living. I happen to be in a fortunate place right now where I'm not desperate, not desperate, but I don't need it. So I'm happy to give it away for free.
Mhm.
And you know, whether that works out or not. Anyway, the second part of your question is,
That's the answer I was expecting. So that's why I was connecting the two. So really, I mean, kudos for doing this. Because one, just for the people listening, one of the big issues in our industry has been teachers, you know, losing their job because people in the profession were all of a sudden, you know, offering their services for a broken price, and then you know, that would just reshuffle the cards, not necessarily in the most positive way. And the
yeah.
second question, which is a huge question, and that you're going to answer in 1 minute and a half, you know, how is this pandemic going to impact your life and our industry in the midterm and in the long term?
I think the worst thing that some companies are doing is saying that we're going to get back to business as usual.
Mhm.
Right now, it is not usual, and it is, opera is the grandest of all art forms. But right now, when you're in the middle of a famine, sometimes you have to tighten your belt. And it's the same thing with opera.
Mhm.
Rather than just completely stop, I would love to see opera companies like the Dallas Opera with this and many of your live recital streams continue to put out art, continue to put it out into the world, because the worst thing you can do is sit there and say, well, we'll just see you in a year, we'll see you in 6 months, we'll see, you know. So I think that's a really important thing, is that we begin the process of recovering without just being so afraid of this that we don't even do it responsibly. Everyone's afraid to be the first. I've got some opportunities coming up in which I might be the first. I was the first to do a live stream recital with Dallas Opera a few days after, you know, COVID hit. I said, I want to do something. I have to put my art out there. We have to tell people this is going to be okay. And the places it should come from are the opera houses themselves. And it should start as soon as they can make it happen.
I totally agree with you. And we need to be present. Now we need to prepare for the future. And to the people who say, oh, I can't wait to have it exactly the way it was before, I say, well, it's not like it was working so well before. So let's try
True.
to learn something from this crisis and just ride that wave and be even stronger and more committed than ever. And for that, we need people who have your generosity in this industry and with the vision. And so I can't wait to see you in the flesh in Dallas,
Me
in
too, my
your
friend.
bed,
Me too.
singing from your bed and being totally paralyzed, or maybe you will be moving a little.
There are flashbacks.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the flashbacks, I get to move around.
And I might actually even see you in Paris if we're in Paris during your comment. Be safe,
Love that.
be well, and I see you soon. Thank you, my friend.
You as well.